Welcome to Conversations and Coffee, where we have conversations that are authentic, lighthearted, and purposeful. Our conversations will be engaging. You will hear from industry experts that will have you saying, "Whoa, wow, I didn't know that." Join us, because it's all about you, your loved ones, and anyone who want to stay informed and, of course, living your best life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations and Coffee. I'm Dr. Joy, the host of this show. I am glad you are eavesdropping on the conversation today. Today, we have here with us Miss Tami Anastasia, who is a dementia consultant, educator, and speaker. She is the author of the book, Essential Strategies for the Dementia Caregiver. Her book focuses just on that, the essential strategies for those caregivers as they pace themselves when they are caring for someone with dementia. Tami has been doing what she loves for a long time, for more than 30 years, to be frank. She has studied, put into practice what she loves to do. She has written articles, written a book, and has been a guest on podcasts, local radio, TV stations. Don't want to say too much about her because I want to give her the opportunity to tell us more as we dive into knowing what dementia is, how it affects seniors, and what strategies are out there to help caregivers, family or professional caregivers, deal with this terrible disease. So wherever you are tuning in, I want you to get your coffee. Tami, do you have your coffee? Got your coffee? And let's start this conversation. So, Tami, I've told our eavesdroppers a little bit about who you are. Why don't you continue your bio by telling us why are you considered the go-to person when it comes to helping dementia caregivers?
All right, Dr. Joy, thank you for having me. So as you mentioned, I am a dementia consultant and educator, and I have a private practice. I have a master's in counseling and certificates in gerontology. I'm a dementia care specialist and also end of life. And then I also facilitate several support groups. So I am considered the go-to person. Actually, to be very honest, the people who came up with that term are some of my colleagues, the professionals in the elder care industry, because I'm able to identify a problem. I'm able to assess a situation and then figure out, okay, this is what the needs are. And I can provide some insight. I can provide additional resources. I could also provide, educate them as to what could be going on from a family dynamic standpoint, from a dementia standpoint, how it's affecting a family member. And then I can also make a lot of referrals. So they kind of think of me as the go-to person because my practice primarily is focused on the family caregiver and the primary family caregiver. And I say primary because there's always usually one person who does most of the care, and then the rest of the family sort of on the periphery, or some are just MIA anyway. So the one that I tend to spend a lot of time working with is the primary caregiver. So it could be the adult child, it could be the spouse, it could be a sibling taking care of another sibling with dementia.
Okay. So lots of experience there and just that passion for making sure people are aware of dementia and how to take care of that person as they go through that process.
Yeah. So, and having a master's degree in counseling helps me deal with a lot of everything, the family dynamics, the change in the loved one, how to communicate with somebody with dementia. I can provide insights, because of my background, I could provide insights when I'm working with a family member. I like to get a very good history on the person who has dementia and a very good history on the relationship relationship between the person with dementia. So that, again, dementia is going to affect and alter their loved one's view of reality. Mm-hmm. And what will happen is that their loved one is going to change. They're going to say and do things that can be quite upsetting, that could be inaccurate, that could be incorrect, insulting. Yeah. And the family caregiver is so affected by it. Mm-hmm. So what I try to do is help family members gauge how to walk through this journey, because what will happen is they get a diagnosis, the family member gets a diagnosis, the doctor says, oh, your loved one has dementia. We'll talk about what dementia is specifically. And then they're left on their own. And so the family caregiver is like, what do we do now? So a big reason for writing my book is I walk the family caregiver all the way through the journey and provide tips, what to expect, how your loved one's going to change, how to communicate, how to cope, what to do with your feelings. There's anger, resentment. These things happen, you know.
So many people have those feelings, that anger, that just trying to figure it out and just wanting to know. So I am so glad that we have you here today so that you will give us insight on that. And it just seems like you have a wealth of knowledge of this. So thank you again for, being here with us. And as we continue to go through this process, I've given our eavesdroppers the definition of dementia in an earlier episode. However, can you tell us again what is dementia and what are the effects it may have on the person that may begin to see the signs of this disease in their loved one?
Great question. So let's clarify what dementia is, because there's a lot of confusion. So dementia is what we call an umbrella term. It describes a group of symptoms. So cancer would be considered an umbrella term. And under cancer, we have multitudes of different kinds of cancer, right? We have breast cancer, lung cancer, stage 1, stage 2. So think of dementia as an umbrella term. It's describing, in this particular case, various kinds of cognitive impairment. So dementia is an umbrella term. It is not a specific disease itself. The diseases are Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, and you can have over 100 different kinds of dementia. But the four that are spoken about the most are Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's is 60 to 70, even maybe 80% of dementia. Yeah. Then you have what is called vascular dementia due to cardio strokes, blood flow. Mm-hmm. We have Lewy body dementia, which is part of Parkinson's, quote unquote. Yeah. And then we have also what is called frontal temporal lobe, which means that the front part of the brain is where most of the cells are dying. And then this causes a lot of behavioral issues. But that being said, the other thing I want to really make clear, Dr. Joy, is that dementia is more than just memory loss. Dementia affects thinking, language, processing information, problem solving, executive functioning, their ability to reason. So what sometimes happens is people think, they don't have memory loss, but they're going to have other cognitive functioning that is impaired or that is being hindered. And that's why you have the umbrella dementia. And now we just want to define what type of dementia does this person have. So think outside of just memory loss, because dementia affects every single functionality. And if they may not show memory loss, they may express dementia in other ways. You'll find them having difficulty coming up with a word, or they'll have difficulty retracing their steps or remembering things. That's a common one. And I'll tell you what are some really basic things we look at. if the mail starts stacking up, if your loved one's been a person who paid their bills on time, if we see mail stacking up, magazines stacking up, their personal hygiene starts to change, especially when somebody was very meticulous and then now all of a sudden they're kind of stinky or they're wearing the same clothes a lot. And this is another thing we do. We look at the refrigerator. The refrigerator will either have a lot of spoiled food or it'll be really, really empty. And then another sign is when they kind of get lost, that they've been going to and from a familiar place their whole life. And now all of a sudden they kind of got lost. And then the other thing is being able to follow instructions. Have it cook. And then all of a sudden can't follow a recipe that he or she's been cooking for umpteen million years. So when we think dementia, don't just think memory loss. You want to look at, again, all the other functions that can be hindered by dementia, by cognitive impairment.
That because most people, when they think about dementia, they are thinking about memory loss.
Yes.
So as we continue to talk about dementia and what it is, are there stages to dementia? And if there are, give us a brief explanation of those stages that people go through.
Yeah, so I'm very cautious about using stages, and I'm going to tell you in the literature there are some people that refer to stages, 3 stages, which would be early stage, middle stage, which would be moderate, and then severe. And then there's other research or other Alzheimer's, dementia, and they refer to it as 7 stages. I myself in the book, I wanted to even make it more simple, and I came up with 4 stages. So I have early stage, middle stage, late stage, and then end stage. But I'm very, very, very cautious, and it's me. It's my own issue about using stages, because people can have symptoms in 2 different stages. And I'm cautious to put stages or labels on people because it's the symptoms we're treating anyway. And I think people want to know stages because they kind of want to get an idea, well, how advanced is it? How far and how long is it going to take? And the problem about that is that everybody's different. Yeah. And so not everybody's going to travel at the same pace. The deterioration isn't going to happen in the same way and at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I don't like to label stages, but I also know that's what people want. But I pay more attention to what are the symptoms they're displaying, because it's the symptoms we've got to take care of anyway. Yeah. And what are those needs? So what I can tell you is, at some point, we go from beginning and there is no treatment for dementia. It's a slow progression. So it is a progressive brain degenerative disease. So we know it's only going to get worse over time, but how fast and how soon, that's where I get cautious about labeling stages. I don't want to compartmentalize anybody because the symptoms can fluctuate. Someone could be in early stage, but also exhibiting symptoms in middle stage. So now does that make them early or middle?
Yeah, I never thought about it like that, because when you do think about stages, you are thinking, okay, you're going from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3, but it just depends on that person. Whether some can be in stage 1 and maybe in stage 4 at the same time. And then
so usually the biggest overlap, so here's how the overlap kind of happens. It will go early stage, middle stage, overlap. Then when they go into middle stage and they progressively get a little worse in middle stage, now you might have a little overlap between middle stage moving into late stage. And then we're going towards late stage, but they still exhibit a few symptoms in middle stage. So you can see how difficult it is. Like, I just don't like to compartmentalize because we're still dealing with symptoms, and the symptoms need to be treated. And what do I say treated? Meaning we have to figure out what the needs are. We have to know what the care needs are so we can provide that. So what we do know, it does progress. How fast, that varies. And how each person is affected by dementia varies. So we do have stages to give people people the comfort of, okay, where are we in this continuum?
Yeah.
But it is a continuum, and keep in mind they can fluctuate. And often they have been showing symptoms 1 to 3 years prior to getting a diagnosis.
But how do you know that? Because I think that's where we are stuck.
Yeah.
How do we actually know that this person is actually going or having these types of symptoms and say it's dementia?
Yeah.
So that's where I guess I'm stuck, because I'm just trying to figure out, okay, if they could be having these stages 1 to 3 years prior, what do I look for as that person? Now, I know we're going to get into that, but those are just kind of some questions that I know not only me.
Yes, it's a great question, because what I want to say is we're still, people are very confused. What's normal aging, and then what is, going towards dementia? So normal aging is we're going to forget. We're going to be, I think of absent-mindedness, not memory loss, but absent-mindedness. What did I go into the room for? And I'll remember. That's right. I want to get my keys, or I can retrace my steps. But with dementia, you can't retrace your steps. You can't remember. You don't even remember going into the room. So what I can say is, if you sense something's off, something's different, I'm going to say, write down your observations. And you want to bring that to a physician, because there are medical things that can mimic dementia-like symptoms, and they may not have dementia, and we're going to want to treat that medical anyway. So my suggestion and recommendation is, when you sense your loved one's off, and we sense when something's off, we do know when something doesn't seem right, or it's out of character for them. You want to start documenting those observations so you have concrete information that you can present to the doctor and say, I have some concerns about my loved one. This is what I'm noticing. And then we can go ahead now and we want to rule out other medical things. Or is it dementia? Because if it is, we want to start a treatment plan as soon as possible. In other words, we want to start implementing things as soon as possible. So it will declare itself eventually if it is dementia, because it's only going to get worse. That's the difference. It's only going to get worse. But trust your instincts. You know your loved ones better than anybody else. If you sense something is off or wrong or out of character, start writing down what you're observing.
Okay. Thank you for that. That was very insightful for me as well, because just kind of trying to deal with that, even with me working with our caregivers, me owning an in-home care business, and working with them, trying to help the families figure out what is going on. That's insightful information. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. And also, none of us want to believe that something's wrong with our loved ones, right?
No, not
we
at all.
we don't. We want to pray it was like just a bad day, or, they're just out of sorts, and totally understandable. But you're going to see there's going to be it's not going to go away. It may happen infrequently. And then if it truly is dementia, or we have a medical problem that needs to be treated, you're going to see it's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. And I think when you just start sensing is the time now you want to be proactive and just write down what those observations are, again, so we can rule out if it is a medical condition that can be treated and the symptoms go away, great. If it is dementia, the earlier we can get a diagnosis, the better.
Okay. So now that we know, we have kind of defined dementia, kind of talked about the stages and we've talked about those stages. I've heard people say just meet the person where they are when trying to handle those behaviors. What are your thoughts on that?
I will say 100%, even maybe 1,000%. It is absolutely essential that we meet the dementia person where they are. So what do we mean by that? A lot of people refer to it as person-centered. I refer to it as meet them where they are. What we mean by that is, as this disease progresses, your loved one is going to say and do things that are bizarre, that are incorrect, and because they've got a brain disease. And what often I would probably say one of the biggest struggles, Dr. Joy, is that we want to keep them in our reality. We want to correct them. We'll argue with them. We'll explain to them, which exhausts the caregiver's energy, right? You're going down this river because their ability to reason, their ability to process information, their ability to remember. One of the things that drives caregivers crazy the most, that depletes them the most, is these repetitive questions. Oh my God, they're asking me the same question over and over. And what we need to do is we do need to meet now your loved one where they are. That is much harder to do. It's easier said than done because your loved one is changing. They're not the same person you knew them to be. Yeah. And so you're dealing with, oh my God, having to adapt and adjust to them while trying to keep yourself afloat in this reality. And it's painful when they don't remember things, and it's painful to see them drift away. And engineers who are brilliant, bright, successful, attorneys, doctors get dementia. And it's painful to see your loved one struggle and change, but we do have to meet them where they are. We have to enter their world, because I'll tell you why. As this disease progresses, they look to us for security, to feel safe, for reassurance, for support, for physical care, physical comfort. They look for us to help stimulate them, to validate, feel heard and understood. So in my book, I talk about how to do that, because it's a process, and it is imperative that we do meet them where they are in their world. And one of the best ways to do that is, imagine if you were them, how would you like people to respond? Because people with dementia, they believe what their mind tells them.
Okay.
Even if it's inaccurate, even if they're paranoid, even if they're accusatory, they believe what their mind tells them. And it's our job to figure out, how do we comfort them now? How do we meet them where they are and provide this comfort and meet their needs? And there's a lot of strategies on how to do that.
Oh my gosh. Just to hear you say that, because you meet so many people, like you said. Some of them can be doctors, lawyers, engineers, and now they have this terrible disease of dementia, and you're trying to meet them where they are, and to know that they are very consistent, like you said, very consistent about what they are saying. Like, it is supposed to be believable. And so what I want the audience, our eavesdroppers, to know is, meet them where they are, please. Because what happens, I think it agitates them. It frustrates you. And like I tell my caregivers all the time, if they are at that moment on the playground in the 1960s. It's
right.
okay.
Yeah. Now you bring up a great point. I'm so glad you said that. Some things that do happen is with people with dementia, they relive their past as though it's happening today.
Yeah.
And they get very confused, and they may confuse the past with the present. That's why I collect that thorough history, because if they're reliving past memories, then we're going to know how to take care of them, how to comfort them. And we need to provide that comfort, that reassurance. You know, their world is altered now. What was familiar is no longer familiar. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you run into this. They'll often say they want to go home, but they are at home.
Yes.
But we don't know what home their mind is thinking of. And home is also a metaphor for feeling safe and feeling secure and feeling, seeing things that are familiar. But if my brain cells, the ones that are still intact, were 40 years ago, that's all I'm going to know, not the brain cells today that are dying, that are in the hippocampus part of the brain. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we have to comfort them. And I will say that all behaviors, what they communicate is a way of expressing a need. And with dementia, you lose that ability to communicate it clearly as this disease progresses. So if somebody is on a playground from the 1960s, let's enter that world with them and reassure them they're okay. And there's a thing called reminiscing therapy, which is one of the best ways to meet them where they are. And I talk about reminiscing therapy. And that touches their soul, because now we're in their world reminiscing with them about things they do remember. So I'm glad you brought that up as an example, because these are all the different techniques and strategies we can implement to meet them where they are. But it is super important, and I'm going to say this. If your loved one has any history of abandonment, rejection, any physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, you need to know that those memories may resurface as this disease progresses. And so that's important information for us to have, because if that's true, again, we're going to know how to comfort them, because fear is a major underlying emotion that people with dementia have. And they'll cling, like you must experience where some loved ones will cling to you. It's called shadowing. And I can't get my breath. It drives me nuts. Well, that's because they're clinging to you as a security blanket.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. So keep in mind that people, when they get dementia, anything and everything they say and do now, they have no control over. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have to pace ourselves on this journey, because I need to know how to interact with these changes. But I want you and the the professionals and the loved ones to know that when you get a diagnosis of dementia, what they say and do now, they have no control over. Mm. And that's a really important distinction to make.
Yes. So I hope that the audience, our eavesdroppers, are really listening to that, because that is so important as far as meeting them where they are and helping them continue that process. So now we've talked about dementia and the person who has it. Let's now dive into the caregiver.
Definitely.
Who do you consider a caregiver? Or give us the definition of a caregiver.
So there's thousands of caregivers, thousands and thousands and thousands of caregivers, right? And there's all different types of caregivers. But the one I primarily work with is the family caregiver, who is taking care of a loved one with dementia. So my focus is very specific on the dementia caregiver because of how dementia affects the loved one, which in turn affects the family caregiver. So I really specialize in dementia caregivers, family caregiver. I can help professional caregivers. I do a lot of professional caregiver trainings on how to deal with people. So you're going to have a limited sample of who I specialize with because it's mainly dementia caregivers, but that's not to negate thousands and thousands of caregivers all over the world. You know, anybody and everybody could be a caregiver at some point in life, but I specialize and focus on the ones that are taking care of loved ones with dementia. Okay. And it can be a professional, but mostly it is the primary. So it could be the spouse or the adult child or a sibling taking care of.
Okay. So as when you think about the family caregiver or the professional caregiver, it's someone who's taking care of this person. When they are in this situation, what can you tell us? What would be telltale signs, even if they have not been diagnosed yet? What could be the telltale signs to watch for, so then they will know, okay, I think something's wrong?
So a lot of them were the things that I mentioned earlier. You know, if you see bills stacking up or they're not paying their bills, again, check the refrigerator. I know that sounds really silly, but believe it or not, that's one of the hallmarks that, and they don't make sense. Or you find they went to the store and the store's 5 minutes away, and an hour and a half, 2 hours later, they don't know, they had problems getting home. You'll find that they may not make sense. They may say things that don't make sense. You'll see, subtle little bit of confusion. They're getting their dates and times mixed up. Executive functioning is a big thing. They'll have difficulty scheduling things, planning things. They'll have difficulty following directions and word finding. They'll start having problems with language, saying the right word, communicating the right word.
Now, Tami, the things that you're mentioning, most people will say, this is just because mom is getting old, dad is getting old.
Yeah.
So how do you really distinguish? Do they have to be doing it over and over and over again to say, now I need to take you to the doctor to really diagnose this issue?
Yeah. So like I said before, if it's a one, it's just going to happen. It's a freak thing. If it's continuing, that's your red flag. Okay. In other words, and again, let's go back to personal hygiene. There's another one, right? That, mom has been wearing the same clothes for like 3 days, 4 days. Again, it's when they're really out of character. And that's what you have to keep in mind, right? If someone's always been sort of a sloppy dresser and no big deal, right? That's the norm. Okay. But it's when it's out of character for them. And again, you're going to see it's not going to go away. That, I think, is the piece, right? Normal aging. We all walk into a room, and again, it's the fact that I can't remember, I don't remember, or I can't retrace my steps. Okay. Most of us can retrace our steps, right? And that's a huge indicator when they can't retrace their steps. And when it really progresses is when they don't know what their keys are for. Like they don't even know. I have clients where their loved ones have put their shoe in the freezer.
Yes, right? I've seen that. Well, it was in the refrigerator. So
yeah. Right. So, but what we're talking about is, the shoe in the refrigerator is much more advanced. And this is where, again, it can be very subtle. We don't want to believe, but if it's repeating and it's consistent, and it doesn't have to be every day, but this is out of character and it's not going away, red flag.
Okay.
And Dr. Joy, the thing to keep in mind is, guess what the number one risk factor is for dementia is age.
Oh.
So the older we are,
yes,
the higher likelihood we're going to get dementia, right?
yes.
So again, if I want families, you professionals, trust your gut, and better to look into it than to ignore it.
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned trust your gut. I always used to tell my students, if you have that feeling, it's time to do something.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, that is to say something's off.
Yeah.
And let's just look into it. And wow, what a relief if it's a thyroid problem or it's a B12 problem. Woo, okay, we could take care of this, right? And it's not dementia. We'll all go out and celebrate. Yeah. If it is dementia, we want to jump on it now so that, again, we can start meeting your loved one where they're at. We can start providing them with more care and start addressing the needs that need to be taken care of.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about your website.
Okay.
On your website, you use something that's called the 6-point process to help the caregiver. Yes. Can you tell us more about those processes and how?
Yeah. So the 6 are the first 3: validate, empathize, and normalize. I do this whether I'm on a 15-minute consult with a client, or I'm in an hour session with a client, or I'm consulting with anybody. Validate, empathize, and normalize. I need to hear the frustrations, the concerns, what the problem is, their thoughts and their feelings. So I spend a lot of time listening and really getting a good picture of what's going on from their perspective. Then I have resolve, reflect, and resolve, reflect, and restore are all involve educating, and it's about providing insights why your loved one might be saying and doing things. It's also about providing strategies on how to deal with these changes. So it's all in each time, and it's about restoring the caregiver's confidence.
Yeah.
They start to doubt themselves, and caregiver guilt is huge. And so each time I'm going to try, whether again it's 15 minutes, an hour, a half hour, whatever time I'm spending with you on the phone, that when you get off that phone or we get off our Zoom session or in-person meeting, that you feel better because we talked. Whether I normalized your feelings, validated your feelings, I can certainly empathize. It's a horrible thing to go through. But if I can restore your confidence and provide hope and strategies, and you walk away a little more equipped than before we talked, that is my goal with the caregiver.
Yes, I love that. That's when I was on your website and going through that, and I saw that 6-point process. I said, "Ooh, this is good," because the caregiver, like you said, they feel guilt. They feel that they cannot handle, and just making them feel that, putting some normalizing how they are feeling is really helpful for them, just like you would do for the person that has dementia.
Absolutely.
You would do the same for the caregiver.
Absolutely. When I get a phone call, when somebody is reaching out to me, it's not because things are going great. It's usually they're overwhelmed. They're at the end of their rope. They don't know what to do. They are very frustrated, angry. They're at their wits' end. They're at the end of their rope, right?
Yes.
So I need to meet them where they're at. So not only do I teach how to meet your loved one with dementia where they're at, it's my job to meet you now where you're at, and what can I do to help you make this journey better for you and your loved one. That is the key. So I have to practice what I teach. I have to practice what I preach. And that is, let me meet you where you're at and see what I can do to help you feel better and more equipped, more educated, with more insight, more self-awareness than before you called me.
I love that. I love it. Thank you. I love that. And the reason is because we focus, I think the caregiver, everyone focus on that person who has dementia, but we need that help for those caregivers. They really need it. So meeting them where they are, just like you said, having those conversations with them, that's going to help them. So yes, thank you. Thank
and
you.
It's funny that you say that because I truly believe that this dementia journey is harder on the caregiver than it truly is on the person with dementia. And let me explain why I feel that way. The person with dementia, their brain is altering automatically. Mm-hmm. And early stage, they kind of can see the changes that are going on, which are scary as all get go, right? But as this disease progresses, they may in their heart know something's off, but the disease is taking over where the caregiver is so affected on so many levels by their loved one changing and seeing often what I'll hear is they drift away. I don't know how to connect with them, and I can teach you how to connect with them. But this journey is heartbreaking for the family caregiver because they're dealing with so much, trying to deal with keeping themselves afloat, and if they have their own family, and then dealing with the loss and these changes, incredibly sad, and at the same time, incredibly frustrating, because if you ask me that same question one more time, I'm going to choke you, right?